Welcome to the Inclusive Heroes Podcast with your host, Miguel Joey Aviles. Buckle up as we highlight and celebrate leaders who make inclusion happen in their world of work. If you're an HR leader, a DEI practitioner, an ERG champion, recruiter, or ally, this podcast shares the stories of how leaders raise awareness, cultivate courage, and achieve organizational transformation. Join us as we go behind the scenes of true inclusion and belonging. This is the Inclusive Heroes Podcast.
Welcome to the last episode of Season 1 of your Inclusive Heroes Podcast. I am thrilled today to share a few news. LinkedIn just named MJA one of the top 10 top voices in racial equity, and the Inclusive Heroes was showcase across the world. And today, for that reason, we have a powerhouse of diversity, equity, and inclusion global workforce expert and friend, Dr. Shirley Davis. Hello.
Hello, Miguel. I am so honored, and it's just such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, the pleasure is all mine. And let me tell you to all our listeners, whether you are on audio or on video, get ready for a treat. And I have a few questions for you, Dr. Davis. And the first one, I just want to get started. I want to know more about you, your diversity story, and your background.
Yeah. So you've already called me a global workforce expert, and that certainly is something that's come over time. But let me just back it up a little bit and just share with you my humanity first, right? I'm a woman of color, but I'm a mom. I was born in North Carolina, raised in the Washington, D.C. area. And it's actually, I was born on a farm, but then my parents moved to the city. So I'm sort of half country girl, half city slicker. And so that's been I'm a daddy's girl. I'm the only girl. I have three other brothers, and I'm the oldest. I'm also an athlete. I played basketball, I ran track, and I played softball, and I was All-American, top in my field there. I'm also a pageant buff for 20 years of my life, from the age of 14 until 20 years later. I actually competed in pageants, won a number of state and local titles, and also won the national title of Miss America United States in 2000. I've traveled a lot. I traveled to about 36 countries and worked in those countries as well. And then ultimately, after I graduated college, I got into banking and financial services, and then ultimately found an opportunity to take on a role in training and development, which also had a component of cultural sensitivity. And that's how I found my niche, both in HR, but also in this area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's not like I grew up saying, one day I want to be an HR professional, but it found me. I graduated with an undergrad in pre-law. I thought I wanted to be like a top prosecutor or a family court judge one day. I have two master's degrees. So one is in HR, the other one's in adult education. And then I have a PhD that's in business and organizational leadership. And so I had a real goal in life to be like a judge or a prosecutor. And then ultimately my calling found me. And that was in this role of helping organizations really become the best that they can be, but more importantly, helping us as workers be able to get the skills and knowledge and the competencies that we need to really be able to thrive.
I love that. I love that. I remember, Dr. Davis, I had the opportunity to see you on action on a SHRM diversity conference. And I was in the audience at the time. I was presenting at the conference too. This was several years ago. And seeing you on stage, really motivating the masses, you certainly are walking on purpose. And that's the topic that this episode has. It's living beyond limits. And you wrote 2 books, and I want to talk about the intersection between those 2 books. So you published recently Living Beyond What If, and the first ever diversity, equity, and inclusion for dummies. So I want to go deep there and talk about what is the intersection between both books?
Yeah. So my careers, I was just talking about it, where my calling, my purpose found me, and I accepted the call and the assignment. And so it really moved me into this role. So ultimately, over 30 years, Miguel, I spent time in HR, going through every aspect of HR. I worked in recruiting, headed up for 10 years. I worked in training and development, but I also worked in employee relations, labor relations, comp and benefits, total rewards, and all of that. But what I didn't know is that as I was taking on those roles, and then I even worked as an HR business partner, I was also then learning and experiencing the world of work and the world of just the realities of being a woman, being a person of color, being a mom, and needing sometimes accommodations, needing sometimes flexibility, sometimes just complete understanding, but more so needing opportunities to be able to succeed, to be able to really get the opportunities at the table. And I didn't always have those. So my life's journey prepared me to be able to write this book, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Not only did I do the work of HR, but then after being a generalist, I specialized and became a chief diversity and inclusion officer, which is where you and I met at SHRM. But even before SHRM, I also worked in banking and financial services as a chief diversity officer, and also in the energy and the utility companies. I did a couple of years there. And so all of this prepared me that I had rolled up my sleeves, got my feet dirty, my hands dirty, and just had an opportunity to truly know what it means to implement this work.
That is amazing. And talking about implementation is so key, particularly as we have seen some sort of an acceleration in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So 2 years ago, Dr. Davis, you saw chief diversity officers. Yes, they were there, but now there are thousands and thousands of us. So I want to talk about living beyond limits when you are a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. Many of us are facing burnout. Many of us are leaving the industry because we are tired, because some of us have lost faith in the field. What can you tell our listeners that are almost like thinking, I'm done with this?
Yeah. So my journey, as I was saying, though, in my corporate career, because I worked in corporate America for 30 years and then ultimately left and started my own global consulting business. Part of it was because I knew that there was something bigger, greater, and more global calling me, that I felt limited from a job description. So I didn't want to be limited anymore. I wanted to have be my own boss and lead my own way. But you're right. The reason why I was able to write Living Beyond What If was because it truly was my story, but my story is the story of so many others. Yes, even though I was in HR, even though I was a chief diversity officer, I was still experiencing discrimination and being overlooked and undervalued and hearing things like, you're not good enough here, or you just need to do this or do that. And yet I'm seeing people who didn't look like me, who were part of the dominant group, right? Mostly males, and often, most of the time, white males, and sometimes often white females, but they were actually moving ahead of me, but I was training them to be my boss. I was in meetings, but I was invisible. I was not necessarily allowed to share as some of the others were, but yet I was the colleague and the peer. So the Living Beyond What If book was really about my life story, but also my career journey of being a woman who has felt limited and really internalized it and started to feel like an imposter, started to feel like I didn't belong. I really felt like I was working hard, getting the results, but not getting noticed. And so Living Beyond What If is that you have to get out of your own head. You have to take your power back and not allow those messages, those microaggressions, and some of those real negative and adverse experiences to define who you are. So if you can release the limitations, release the fears, release some of the negative noise that we allow ourselves to believe, then we can get beyond that to realizing our own dreams. And that's what I'm doing today. But the intersection with that and DE&I is that we've got to have leaders that are creating cultures of inclusion, belonging, acceptance, trust, and psychological safety if they're going to truly attract top talent and get the best work from us.
That is powerful. And limits can be problematic, Dr. Davis, and particularly when one has big dreams and big aspirations, and one is working on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The stress that we are going through it's incredible. And I remember when I used to be a chief diversity of inclusion and diversity, and I could never forget my God-given talent and my purpose. And that was at the center stage. Yet, we have also a calling to improve the workplaces. And it's important. It is important to know when you have arrived to that moment where you need to move on. And I believe many of us have faced that moment, including myself. I did the work for 3 years. It was the role of a lifetime. I served my country. I served my people. Yet at the end of the day, I believe that living beyond limits is focusing on impact. The impact that you have in the world, in the community, in your own organization. So can we talk about challenges? Can we talk about lessons? It's critical as we do life. So tell me, what has been some of the biggest challenges that you have had and some of the biggest lessons you have gained?
Wow. Well, I will share with you some of those that I think are really, key and relevant even still today. And I experienced these things years and years ago, but unfortunately, people still experience them today as well. As we do audits and organizational assessments and focus groups and listening sessions, and we're hearing from the voice of the employee and their experience, I'm finding that my story is still there. So some of the challenges for me has constantly been trying to convince and persuade leaders that this is their role, their responsibility, that this is a business strategy, it's an imperative. Some of the other challenges for me has been experiencing, being marginalized and trivialized and not taken seriously and overlooked, as I mentioned earlier, but also being a token. There's a couple of times where I was selected just because I was Black. I was already doing a great job, but they weren't noticing that more than they were trying to fill sort of a goal because they've been under consent decree and settled a class action lawsuit. So I've been through those, but then I've also had leaders who have not always been supportive of diversity. And then I've had some just outright resistors, and then constantly being undermined and sometimes even sabotaged. And that's why, Miguel, as you mentioned too, so many of my sisters and brothers in this field are tired, they're fatigued, they're overwhelmed, they're stressed out and burnout, and then they're leaving. If I did not have the resources that I have, the relationships and the network to hold me up and to sort of lick my wounds and to strengthen me, that I would probably feel that same way too. And I've had those moments, but I have to recognize this is what I'm called. I'm wired to do this. And I see the importance and the impact. So it's allowed me to look beyond some of those negative experiences because I do still see a great amount of impact and transformation that's happening.
Absolutely. And your book, DEI for Dummies, talks about those systems, talks about those strategies. Can you share with the audience what is the spirit of this book and what do you want to achieve through it?
Yeah. This book was actually when I was approached by Wiley & Sons, who is the franchise behind this, and there's over 2,500 of these books. So I'm thrilled to have written the first ever on this particular topic. Given the current times that we're in, we're highly polarized. This is a very sensitive topic, but yet it's a great focus now for many organizations, given what we've been through over the last few years. But I wrote it. They asked me to write it for middle managers and above. Not for us who drank the Kool-Aid, we get it, right? But write it for the leaders who really are still trying to grapple with understanding its importance and to see it as a real business imperative and to see it as a competency that every leader ought to have, and to not be blockers and resistors, but learn how to be an ally, a champion, learn how to be, really a driver and an implementer and a bridge builder of this work. So the spirit behind the book is to provide for them research, data, statistics, best practices, tips, tools, and yes, to be able to give them what they need to be able to implement. So it's a combination of a one-stop roadmap, resource, and reference guide, and it takes away any excuses to say, I don't know. The book gives you so much. It's like 21 chapters, 350 something pages of all things DE&I to help you understand what it is, why it's important, what your role is, and the impact that it can have in sustaining the success of your organization.
I love that. I want you to show that book one more time and tell people where can they get it.
This is available on Amazon, but it's also available in Target and Walmart and Barnes and Nobles. And so please, wherever books are sold, and as a matter of fact, in May of this year, it's going to a number of airports around the country where you can purchase it at Hudson Booksellers. So I'm so thrilled and excited. As a matter of fact, Living Beyond What If is already there. It's in 95 airports, and this is also on Amazon as well. But I am thrilled that it's available now. It's something that, leaders need to have it as their, I say, the Bible for DE&I and for leadership, because it's not just for us. Even though some of my colleagues have read this and they said, oh my God, Dr. D, that is a masterpiece. There's so much in here that I wanted to know. There's so much more I can do, even as a diversity and inclusion officer. So I'm thrilled to hear that it's a book for all of us.
I love that. And as I told you, I'll be traveling for a few conferences and I'll be looking for that book. I'll be taking that picture and I'll be posting it because, we have to celebrate. We have to celebrate each other here. So you mentioned that this book that you have DEI leaders and you have HR leaders and people all over the place reading this book. So the vast majority of our audience are in the DEI space, are HR leaders, but also middle managers as well. So I'm going to ask you to share a few advices for them. So let's start first with these DEI practitioners that have been in the field for less than a year. Let's just think about that. These brand new DEI practitioners that are starting sometimes in many organizations when DEI is brand new. Their maturity stage is at the beginning stage. What do you have to share with them in the form of advice?
Yeah. A couple of things is if you've been in this work for less than a year, I would encourage you to please get knowledge, education, and get with someone who's a seasoned practitioner. Get with someone who's been doing this. I know there's a number of programs that are out there, but I would encourage you to get with someone who has not just read a book, not just read a study, but really has done the work and rolled up their sleeves, because it's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of bureaucracies, a lot of politics, there's a lot of things you need to be able to navigate so that you can be successful in your first couple of years. Also, if it's your first year, do a lot of listening and observing, asking questions, inquiring about the level of engagement and commitment, getting an understanding of the pulse of the organization, the needs of the staff, the experiences that they're having, but also assess the appetite and the level of readiness from the leadership, because you can only go so far if you don't have the right level of support and engagement from them. And then the last thing I would say in your first year, or as you continue to do this, is don't just only focus on counting heads. Work on making sure that the heads count. And that is not just the diversity and the representation piece of it, but recognizing that the inclusion is really where the work is, and the equity, ensuring that the organizational culture, the values, that this is integrated and embedded in everything that the organization does. So I don't want you to think that this is about recruiting a few women and a few more people of color and a few more people that are from underrepresented diverse groups. And it's not just about doing, a couple of training programs, but this needs to be about how do we inculcate this and make this a part of the organization's DNA. So look at it from the most broadest macro, global, strategic business perspective, and not from a very limited lens.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What about those that are veterans that have
Yeah.
been in this field for a while, that have done this in some other companies? What do
Mhm.
you have to tell them?
Yeah, so and I'm one of those, right? You're one of those. We've been in this for a long time, but I want you to know that there's still always opportunities for us to learn and grow. I am still learning and growing as well. So even though I'm considered a global workforce expert, I recognize that I am still evolving and growing and developing as well. So never assume that you have all the knowledge and that you have everything there is to know about DE&I. So that's the first part. Continue to be a lifelong learner. I would also say too, reach out to your other fellow colleagues and ensure that there's support there, but also opportunities for you to benchmark best practices so that you can always continue to upskill and reskill, up your game, right? Take yours up another level as well. Always be looking for more things that you can do. And again, even as we think about, and I've been in this for almost 30 years, but I'm still recognizing though that the world continues to change, the marketplace continues to change, the demographics are changing, and as we look at technology, it's redefining the ways that we work. So don't assume
Mhm.
that I've done it this way always and I'm going to keep doing it this way because it works. Nope. Sometimes you need to look at ways that you can do it differently and be more efficient, be more effective. So don't assume that there's only one way to do it.
Oh, powerful, powerful. Now, Dr. Davis, let's talk about the future, what the future looks for you. I know you have several things going on your end, certifications, events.
Mhm.
Can you share with the audience more about what you have coming up and how they can connect with you?
So I am so thrilled. Thanks for asking that because what we did with this book, I actually took my 30 plus years and I put it in this book. But not only my 30 plus years in HR and DE&I, and I also put in my personal stories because they're the stories of so many more of us. But I also have now taken my DEI certificate of mastery is now in this book as well. So the book is now the actual textbook. So we're going to be offering a new DEI certificate of mastery course this year. It's coming up in August. So please check that out on my website. I'm also so excited about the advanced practitioner program. And that is for us, Miguel, for those of us who are older, more seasoned and tenured, been doing this for a while, but still want to expand and grow our practices because too many times I've seen my colleagues have one or two or three offerings, and that's not enough to really have broad impact around the organization. So I have a program now where I pull together all of my tools, my assessments, my resources, my all of the checklist questions, things that you need in order to truly integrate this into your organization. So I am offering that to our colleagues as well. And then lastly, we're so thrilled to now be working with a lot of colleges and universities to get the DEI for Dummies book to become a part of degree programs, to become a part of certificate programs, because and not only that, make this be more of a career path. There's not a lot of colleges and universities that give you
Yes,
degrees in DE&I.
yes, yes, yes. We need more of that.
There's a book for it. So
Congratulations, congratulations on that, and your legacy in the diversity, equity, and inclusion work will be here for years and years and years to come. So now, to close this last episode of season 1 of the Inclusive Heroes podcast, I would love for you to leave our audience to what inspires you to live beyond limits.
what inspires me is when I can help so many people and I see the fruits of my labor. I actually see the manifestation of the hard work. Look, my goal is to leave everything, every client, every company that I've worked for, leave it better than the way I found it. So I can say in every company that I have been in, that I have put in strategies, I've solved some problems, I've offered some new ideas, some innovative solutions, and companies have been better as a result of my work, my ideas, my thought leadership. And I want that to be my continued legacy. And I want to leave that advice to all of my colleagues as well. I'm not in this for the money. I'm not in this for the fortune and the fame and the name recognition. I am in this because I truly want my daughter I want our children, the next generation, to come into a more inclusive world where they're accepted for who they are. For yes, as Martin Luther King said, is that they are judged by the content of their character and not necessarily by the color of their skin or their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their disability, or the sexual orientation and identity. This is really about making an impact and making a real change. So if you're in this for any other reason, you're in the wrong position.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we close the first season of the Inclusive Heroes podcast. Thank you so much for joining us in this journey. Thank you so much for being with us. And to our audience, please follow Dr. Davis on LinkedIn, go to her website, support her work. And Dr. Davis, once again, thank you so much for being with us in the Inclusive Heroes podcast, season number 1. Thank you.
Congratulations. Congratulations on a phenomenal season. And thank you for letting me close it out with you.
Absolutely.